Tonight, we play catch-up on For All Mankind and Invincible, and we tell you what we think of those shows as well as everything else going forward. All this coming up right now on The Writer Brothers. And welcome back to the Writer Brothers Tuesday Night Live show. I am, of course, your host, Petey York, joined by the ever-so-lovely Mr. Corione, Witch in Residence.
Hello.
The ever-so-lovely Mr. Pollo Zapatos. The ever-so-lovely Mr. Skogly Jotun. And the ever-so-lovely H. Marie. H. Marie, please wave for everybody.
That was awesome.
So, we have got quite a show for everybody this evening. We've got two shows that are just, without a doubt. Oh, speaking of, we have the lovely Sherry in the chat now saying hi. Hello, Sherry. Welcome. Good show to pick to join us tonight. Apparently,
that was just perfect. I can't even. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
There's no words for how perfect that was done.
Yeah, that you just don't, and there it is, right there. It is cemented on the broadcast in the comments. It worked out. So let's quickly go around the room. Corione, how you doing this week? How was the show watching experience for you?
I was doing pretty good. I basically shotgunned my way through For All Mankind.
Same.
It was. There's a line in The Martian where one of the guys says, hey, 3 years in space, that's more than enough space for me. I kind of understand how he feels, not gonna lie. But so far I'm liking the show, and I got through it, and really enjoying Invincible. So glad we're gonna get to talk about it.
Yeah, I just finished Invincible Season 1 today, so my review is coming in hot off the press when we get to it here shortly. Pollo Zapatos, what about you? You got, well, you're actually the reason we got to these shows, because I think you watched them first, so you weren't really playing catch-up as much.
No, but I am finally seeing the difference between binging and waiting for the weekly release, because in our pre-show, we talked about our feelings on the show so far, and for me, I've just been watching every week since season 2. And where you guys have been binging, and I'm like, okay, it is a lot slower, build up, but also there isn't as much build up. This show is really good about dropping chaos, and then that's where the episodes resonate for a minute. And so I'm ecstatic that we're finally on For All Mankind, because I've been talking about it since we got to Apple. But then
you mean since we started?
Yeah, exactly. But Invincible on the other hand, I'm excited for, because I love the messing with the Superman. I think Omni-Man is what if Superman's dad showed up instead of Clark. And I think it's such a fun idea. And I love Invincible overall, because it's one of the few comic book shows that immediately explodes the universe rather than waits 4 comic books to tell you that aliens are a part of it.
Good. That's good teaser discussion for when we get to that. So Skogly, what about you? What was your experience with having these? Did you have to binge hard or what?
Well, I watched Invincible when it first came out, and I've been ecstatic about that show ever since, and I just can't convince anybody to watch it because it's animated basically, and it's just oh, it's so good. So I'm stoked about that. I'm way behind on For All Mankind. It's really good. I was skeptical going in, but it's so far so good, but I don't know. Don't worry about spoilers with me, I guess. But yeah.
Well, like we
I
said,
got some work to put in there yet.
It'll be on the back end of the discussion, so it'll work out just fine. Because I know that you only get so much time with us today. All right, so that brings us, of course, to H. Marie. H. Marie, what were your how I think your binging experience may have been similar to mine, but I won't speak for you, of course.
I'm enjoying it. To be perfectly honest, I kind of zoned out. I've read both Invincible and Romance Time, so which one am I responding on?
Just a little bit of a teaser of both.
Well, I will say for all mankind, it's very rare for me to not be able to guess a show. And there have only been very few things in this show that I've actually been able to predict accurately. One I will review eventually because I was surprised how well I caught that one. Definitely some twists and turns that I was not expecting with For All Mankind, but Invincible, oh boy. I'm honestly, I'm kind of preferring it over The Boys, to be honest. It's a lot easier to handle for me with the less realism, to be honest. But I don't want to go much more into that without revealing anything.
Good teaser discussions, guys. That may be how we'll have to do this going forward. Is just have a little bit of here's a little bit of what we thought about everything, and then we start the night. But the pop culture sphere has been a little bit on the hush hush side. We're still, of course, waiting for that so wonderful champagne popping news from Lucasfilm that has not been solidified just yet. But we did have some. What do we have going on, Corione? Do we have any new rumblings anywhere else in the world?
Well, there actually was a little bit of Disney news. Disney was trying to do a town hall where everyone thought they were going to be making major change announcements, but it turns out that Iger is trying to seemingly calm a lot of the discontent in his own ranks right now. After the SEC filing, which made it very clear that Disney understands that they've lost the public message that they've been trying to put out, that even like Disney diehard fans are turning against their messaging over storytelling that they've been doing lately. And admitting that, and then having a town hall where he basically says, like, yeah, guys, don't worry, we're still on to try to make everything work. Didn't go over too well with the Disney employees. So it could be that Bob Iger's going to wind up with a little bit of a civil war in his own ranks right now, which is exactly what Disney doesn't need at this moment.
Yeah, Stephanie Janizek from Stephanie Janizek Smuggler's Canteen has popped it. It says it was a nothing burger, and good to see you, Stephanie. Of course, if you guys haven't checked her out, please do. Quality content,
always there.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. Any other rumblings before we get into Invincible?
No, I think we're all just really, really stoked for Invincible.
Well, alrighty then. If that's...
and to see if that show really is Invincible.
Well, yeah, I don't have a title for it. Yeah, that's how we'll do our opening titles from now on. Have a little blood splatter each week with the TWB logo. No, that's not going to happen. But at 1,000 subs, though, we're probably going to redo the intro. Finally get around to that. But I've decided until we hit certain marks, there's really no reason to change up. We got a good thing going. And also, we'll worry about putting the hair up a little bit more starting January 9th on our first broadcast of 2024. But until then, it's the holidays. We'll just have a nice, fun, relaxing discussion with everybody else in the chat. This is not quite like Open Forum Casual Friday, but it's pretty much, we're covering all of Invincible Season 1, so this is a little bit different from our usual, we talk about an episode specifically. We got to talk about the entire season. So, Scogli, since you're on the time crunch, why don't you tell us your thoughts on Invincible Season 1, and of course your favorite parts. So just anything else that you feel is on your mind this evening?
Oh man, I watched Invincible when it first came out, relatively early on, and man, the pacing of this show is impeccable. It's like it's basically runs on the same trajectory as like Silo did. It starts and you're like, oh, this is interesting, and at the end of the first episode, you're just like, oh my god, and then the stage is set up for episode 2, and then something happens at the end, and you're just like, oh my god, and the stakes are raised again, and it just keeps going that way until you get to the very end, and you're just like, just left like bone chilled. You're just like, oh my god, this is nuts. This is one of the best shows like I've ever seen. Like it is a crazy good show.
It was that first episode. Nemesis of Eden says that first episode was easily the worst pace, but it gets better. That I would have to agree with that assessment, because it's basically an alternate universe Justice League, or I mean, they're called the Global
sort
Guardian. Sort of. Okay. We have Darkwing, who's basically just Batman. We have Omni-Man, who's basically literally just evil Superman. There's War Woman, who's literally just Wonder Woman, like right down to the origin story even. Like, everything is supposed to be. We have a Green Lantern type character. Instead she like swallows a suppository or something, but I did find it funny how they, go through the whole, this is what they are in real life, and then, they're dead now, so who cares? That was a waste of time.
Well, I mean, but that was kind of perfect for this, right? I mean,
Red Rush is literally just a Flash, but in Russian.
It's Russian Flash. It's great, right? Like, all of them are like, what if, what if this character but something else, right? Like, what if Green Lantern but, a random woman,
but
right?
There was definitely a lot of butt with that character.
Skin
tight energy thing outfit. What I don't know now let's talk about Adam Eve real quick. Adam Eve is without a doubt the probably one of the most nerfed superheroes since Electro in No Way Home.
Not exactly.
I'm curious to hear an explanation. Like, you can manipulate atoms, and yet if you can manipulate atoms, you basically have control of reality.
Have you watched Adam Eve yet?
Well, hold on. First, I'm going to point out that I do know a little bit about this series, as I have the compendium right here. Okay? Yeah, I know. I know. But dude, if I'm going to nerd out, I'm going to nerd out over something of quality, right?
God. Yeah, let me see. Yep, there it is, right there. Extra levels of Dorkination detected. He says, using his trike order.
But no, look, the piece is like, the idea is like, yes, early on they snag various characters from various series, right? And kind of make little changes to them. But the key with Adam Eve is, part of her whole thing is she holds herself back. Okay? Yes, she can do all these things, but should she? Is like her big piece. Okay? And there are times when she won't in the series. And then, yes, you're going to get the craziness. Right? But I mean, her primary limiting factor is her own imagination and what her, capability, like, and how far she's willing to push.
Yeah.
So.
Nemesis of Eden says, I can't wait to hear about the climax of episode 1. I thought we just talked about that. We need to talk about the brutality of Red Rush's death, how he perceives time like 100 times faster than most people. So when Omni-Man is crushing his head, that lasted way longer for him than we perceive in the show. Yeah,
that was like
that's
hours.
True. That's almost as brutal as one of the execution methods I came up with for Galaxia. Duplicate is my girl for sure. Yeah, I mean, she's awesome for many reasons. Kitty Flip coming back says, nice beard, bros. Oh, thank you. I'm assuming you're talking to all 4 of us. I just realized John decided to put hair on his face again.
There we go.
It's for a costume.
It's for a costume.
Literally 1 week. Well, I mean, it took me like 4 weeks to grow it back, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I've been growing this since July 3rd, 2020, and I've never stopped, so.
Well,
Actually, no,
all I
it's
can
like
say is
June
the Movember
29th, but-
is real around here. But, yeah, look, that fight where Omni-Man decides to take apart the Guardians of the Globe is just brutal, right? Like, it's absolutely savage. And
this is one of those shows that just basically is a bitch slap in the face to people who are like, cartoons, you can't tell a real story with a cartoon. This is almost, it's basically on par with The Boys in a lot of ways. Like, The Boys is like super grotesque, but it's also got a bit of that cartoony element to it because you don't want it to be too realistic. Otherwise, yeah, if a show gets too distressing, human queasiness will take over and you won't have an audience.
Invincible's pretty brutal.
oh yeah, no,
It came
and
close. Like that last episode of season 1 is just freaking brutal. When he just holds him in front of the train, I'm watching this like, jeez. This is this is going where no cartoon has gone before, and it's working. I like it, but man, I'm just sitting here like
it's
well,
horrific,
it was supposed to shock you, and it did.
It's great,
right?
Big fan.
And you know what? Look, let's be honest. We've all seen the Superman kind of story, but this took it to a more interesting place, because the neat thing about Omni-Man is not that he turns into the bad guy of season 1. It's that he's so conflicted about being the bad guy of season 1. Right? That his time on Earth has changed him so much. And yet he still has his duty. He still has his mission. And you get the distinct impression that there is going to be a significant price for his failure.
It's like what
Right?
makes him actually leave after his big showdown with Mark there. It's like, what will you have? It's in the recap of an episode of season 2, right? It's like, what will you have in 500 years? It's like, I'll still have you. It's like, bah! It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's like I said earlier, like it's the original, like it's Superman's dad, not Superman. Like it's as if the Kryptonians were still in their colonial phase, and this is how they were colonizing. And part of it was like learning Earth's defenses, right? Which were, the Justice League. And I love that they did the Justice League because they're just trying to like tell you like we can skip ahead. Like let's just accept that the Justice League is a world, but let's also drop all of the literal rules, because it turns out there was a bunch of comic book rules for a lot of comic books coming up, and Invincible breaks every single one of them. Cops are not always perfect. Heroes are not exactly super.
Well, that was part of the deal with Image Comics, right? I mean, Image Comics broke away from were writers and artists from Marvel and DC that had enough of Marvel and DC's nonsense and wanted to write their own stuff.
There was a literal rule book for the longest time with printed media, kind of like the FCC. In terms of like radio broadcast, there was something similar that was
the Comics Code.
Yeah, the Comics Code. And Invincible is like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Like, we're not gonna whitewash reality just to propagandize cops.
Well, there was more to it than that, right? I mean, Todd McFarlane wanted to create Spawn for ages, right? but could never have gotten away with it under DC and Marvel, right? You know, you can really make the argument that Invincible would have been made by Marvel or DC, but they made it here because it was a story that needed to be told, right?
Yeah.
You know, this is a worthwhile little adventure.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a different Superman. Like, finally, we don't just have the Kansas hero who just grew up with good parents. Like, that's really the most lottery story ever, and it works out. But like, we also kind of want to see what would happen if it didn't work out. And that's what I love about this, and that's what I love about Hanging the Code is like, yeah, you can have the code for one of those. Like, Marvel, you guys be the dorks. You guys follow the comics code. You guys keep everything PG, PG-13. And then DC and Image and everybody else, like, make your own code. Like, certain types of heroes can never be bad guys because those kinds of limiters change the game. But they don't have to restrict the game like they did for so long.
Well, here's what I would say. I think the comics code, the comics code does serve an important purpose, right? Because before the comics code came out, there were a lot of horror comics. It was a pretty dark place, and a lot of younger kids were reading it.
Yeah.
I definitely go for it.
Yeah, since we're still a small enough channel, let's go ahead and let our comments or participants in the chat get a word in real quick. Nemesis of Eden writes in, I feel like it's Mark that makes Omni-Man conflicted, not Earth. I agree. He even talks about his own wife basically being like a pet. That part I'm actually still unsure of. I don't know if he actually meant that, because if Mark is winning him over, then by extension, he's still going to feel something for the person that he helped, bring that life into existence with.
Well, I think this is like the biggest demonstration of objectification of a woman. Like, what would a god like Omni-Man see a woman as? Just a human mortal.
Which I think up until the moment in the baseball game was his perspective, but I think he was just saying that to convince Invincible to his side.
I
think he was trying to convince himself.
Exactly. Like,
Probably
I think he is so bent on the mission that what we're actually hearing is his projection on Mark. Like, he's like, why are you like this? And Mark is like, how are you not? And Omni-Man is like, obviously I'm better than them. And Mark is like, none of that matters. And he's like, I know.
Okay, but hear me out on this one too, okay? Because this is an important piece of it to actually remember, okay? The piece leading up to that line is just as important as that line. Because he's talking to Mark about how long Viltrumites live, right? He's easily going to be Mark is going to easily be several thousand years old. And he's only half Viltrumite, right?
Well, there's no for sure, because they already saw that the Viltrumite blood was infecting him.
Right, but I mean, it's entirely possible that Nolan could live to be 10,000
years old, yeah.
Right? In that regard, a human that lives, maybe 100 years, right, is a real drop in the bucket in that lifespan. And that's got to be something not just hard for Nolan to, not just hard for Nolan's wife to deal with, but hard for Nolan to deal with too. I mean, can you imagine living, having a partner that was only going to last equivalent of a month to you?
Nemesis of Eden says he's had hundreds of Debbies.
I wouldn't be shocked if he had hundreds of Debbies in the past.
And
that's
sure, but that's just it though. Not a single one of them. How many of those did he have offspring with? And this one did. And the thing is, it wasn't just the fact that my son's doing something. She had to explain it to him before he saw it. If she didn't go down to talk to him about that moment, he wouldn't have cared about it one way or the other. And so I think that, he is trying to convince himself, because deep down, as far as all the hundreds of Debbies go in his lifetime, this one is a little bit different than all the others. And so...
No, I think this one is, I think that's the best part about this, is what does this race actually intend on accomplishing? he could do this 1,000 times to 1,000 planets, 1,000 years in a row. And what has he done? And that's the part that like Mark is really showing him is like, dude, do you not see how your people literally don't let you have friends?
Yeah.
Like they want you so separated and so alone that you only think of the mission and you imagine that they're your friends, but they're not there for you. They don't care about you. And Mark is like I don't think Debbie's different necessarily from anybody else, because I think that's part of the story. Is it's not that people are different, it's that just people matter intrinsically.
Oh yeah, and I'm not taking away
from why or how, and it's not your business. They just do.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think that, you know, if there was going to be a healthy relationship here, Nolan would have had that conversation with Debbie of like, do you have any idea how long I'm going to live? Do you realize what's going to happen here? Right? Like, I can be with you that, you know, 60 years you've got left, right?
Yeah. All right, hold
on.
Yeah. Let's see. A similar context to Fate said is but I must go. I look forward to seeing the rerun. Stay amazing, you beautiful beings. Considering what happens to Mark later on, I know a Viltrumite will be in it. Will go to any length to succeed in their mission. But anyway, sorry. I saw that Nemesis of Eden wants to head out, so thanks for stopping in, Nemesis. Appreciate your contributions to the discussion this evening, as well as your enthusiasm. And I don't know.
As always,
I might be streaming later this evening. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, I think that, yeah, he was trying to get Mark onto his side, and then they probably would have had a talk about, oh, you know, of all the pets I've had, you're my favorite, or something like that. But it's, yeah, it just...
Well, knowing what happens in season 2, it does kind of tease that whole part. Again, it's not so much that, like, Mark is special. It's the same special that every parent should feel with every child that they have.
Yeah.
Like, it's what matters is not the mission. It's not the journey itself. It's about who you journey with. And when they're your people regardless of whether it's 60, 1,000, or 5 years. Like, it doesn't matter. Your team is your team. And that's the best part of life, is sharing your adventures. Like,
well, and that was my answer too, when he said that if you're all going, you know, you're gonna outlive them and they're all gonna die, so what's the point? And I'm like, you know, what else, you know, what's the point of even having any attachment? I'm like, they're seeing their legacy. I mean,
well,
how would you like to consider this though? Like, how would you like to actually, like I love that they brought this up in the Orville with Isaac's character, and that was the selling point for marriage, was the fact that he's like, yeah, I'll take care of your children and their descendants, and I'll watch your family grow, and it's like, how cool would that be to actually see that? You know, you get to actually be the one, you get to be the story keeper, so to speak, of all your friends and their descendants for time and time again. I mean, that in of itself sounds like reason enough for me, but I mean, his reason was, well, you know, obviously it pulled at the heartstrings.
The mission. Like, that's the worst part about the reality of people taking on the grand purpose.
Right, the higher good.
If you actually believe in the grand purpose and you believe that you know you're on it, you'll sacrifice everything to achieve it. And that's a problem. Like, you are, like, and I think that's what we're really seeing with Omni-Man, is he's struggling with why he's choosing the mission over anything else. Like, why is Viltrumite so worth it?
See, and that's I was actually able to relate to that mindset as a recovering religious zealot myself, because a lot of
just religious zealot, but military zealot too.
But that's a lot of what Omni-Man's mentality is. I mean, how many religious types, the toxic variety, I should say, think that, oh, well, this life doesn't matter. I have the correct religion. I'm saved. Therefore, you know, you all are beneath me because I'm pure now and I'm on the right path. Like, that's essentially this. It's basically what Omni-Man is doing, because, you know, the
when you're raised in something, it's just the way it is.
The Viltrumites think they are the hot shit of the galaxy, and so
Well,
that's
they
always
are.
There's literally nothing proving them wrong. Like
They
that's
are.
what happens
Exactly.
when a bully is a super. Like they are literally capable of manifesting the reality they want because they can force and subjugate everyone to listen, and that's what tyranny is. But at the same time, even Omni-Man is like, I don't want to be king of this planet. I just want to subject them to my.
I just want to set them up for
Like,
my brothers and sisters to come be king and do the
Well,
dirt, the rest of the
and for
dirty.
what?
Okay.
Because he's like, we don't really need resources. We don't eat, drink, or sleep. We just kind of are a thing. And I don't really owe them anything because I don't hang out with them anymore. And the only reason we started doing this is because when we do hang out, we killed the entire world we're all sitting on. So,
It's not exactly that simple.
Exactly.
There is-
None of it's simple because he grew up in a die-hard nationalist religion.
No,
And
but
now
there
he
is
has
a reason why that religion exists. They have not gotten to it yet in the animated series, though.
Well, they
Awesome.
did get to it in the season 1 in the part at the very least about where the order came from of like conquering planets. Like
That's not
we
the
can't
whole
be
story.
together.
Yeah, but
Right,
that's not the
right.
whole story.
That was but to me it's more like what if the Spartans won? And so far all we know is that Sparta won, but we have no idea what happened to the survivors of the other factions. We don't know what happened to Greece. We don't know what happened to Thrace. We don't know any of that. But as far as the Spartans winning, that shows who Omni-Man is he's a warrior before a person. And that's why it's been so hard for him to recover into becoming a person again. Because like, I think for the first time, one of his kids is actually questioning him.
Well, there's a piece of that. I'm just going to say there is a significant reason why they are traveling out into the galaxy and conquering other races. And it's actually a fairly reasonable reason. Okay. Given their circumstance, I mean, it's not moral according to our code, but it is a logical reason why they're doing what they're doing. Now, that all being said, I definitely don't approve, right? But here's the key thing, right? I mean, I think that running into humanity was a real unique wake-up call for Nolan, because I don't think he experienced a culture like ours before, right? Or a species like ours before that actually really, in general, does give a damn about each other. And if we look at season 1, a lot of it is about the fact that humanity cares about each other, and why we do what we're doing is because of each other's humanity, right? Mark helps out the rock dude because he learns to care about him, right? To take down Machine Head. Okay? The Mahler twins, even though they're like in prison at the beginning, like right after the beginning of this, do actually care about the one security guard. And they're like, oh man, I'm really sorry it had to be you on today. Right?
Yeah.
Like, in their own twisted way, they actually give a damn, right? Robot even gives a damn about other people.
That
right?
was though there was some twists with that character that I didn't quite like. I knew he was more than a machine, but I didn't think it was gonna be some kind of weird defective human that can't breathe oxygen.
Yeah,
so that
did like that.
That was a very fascinating twist. It's just really it basically takes the Justice League, and instead of doing bad guy of the week, decides, well, what if Superman's the bad guy? As John says, what if Krypton is a conquest nation and not? It's basically an alternate universe Justice League is really what it boils down to. But that's just it. When he killed them at first, I was thinking that, okay, maybe he's supposed to be the sworn protector. Well, that means he's supposed to be like the supreme overlord. And so the reason he was killing all the heroes was so that Invincible would have a bigger challenge going in to take up the mantle. But when he finally reveals that, oh yeah, our planet's just a bunch of conquests, and oh yeah, this is now an intergalactic thing going on. And then, of course, we find out about the coalition of planets at the end of season 1. I was like, this can go anywhere. And then we get right into episode 1 of season 2, and we're going interdimensional. And I'm like, okay. So we're going to have another multiverse war just like in Loki?
Well, actually, I will say that, God, and I can't remember the guy's name from that second season, first episode, but that character is probably the first villain, like the first true Rogues Gallery member for Mark. Like that dude is probably that, right? Like that's a real nemesis worthy of Mark. Yeah. Because no matter what Mark does or where he goes, this guy can always recruit somebody to take on Mark, right? He can always deal with that invincible power set, right? And we're gonna get to see some interesting pieces along the way, right? We've hit on some of the core points of season 1. We know that in this universe, magic is a thing, aliens are a thing, super science is a thing, crazy psychic powers are a thing. Like all of it is there, right? All the chess pieces are in play. And yeah, I think this is going to be really good. I mean, because we're not just watching Mark's story, we're not just watching Nolan's story, we're also watching Debbie's story too, right? And
yeah,
after the events of season 1, to say she'd be devastated would be an understatement. Yeah. Also, did anyone else notice that the costume designer for everybody is Mark Hamill?
Yes, I noticed that right away.
I thought that was cool.
Like, yeah, I can't remember what line he said in the first episode. I'm like, no, you're the Joker. And H. Marie didn't get it at first until we paused. That's what I do enjoy watching this on Amazon Prime. Like, Amazon Prime's probably the best streaming service because,
X-ray mode.
You're like, yeah, all I gotta know is, wait, whose voice is that? Pause. IMDb pops it up right there. Oh, hey, I know what that is. There you go. Free advertising for Amazon Prime. Yeah, whereas Disney Plus Paramount's freaking trash can of streaming right now. So yeah, all right. Overall, great show. Very solid writing, but it is very heavy-handed. Deals with a lot of themes and emotions. But H. Marie, did you want to get in on no? Okay. So, any last thoughts on Invincible? Next week, of course, we'll be caught up and on the latest episode, and we'll be watching along with the rest of the world, finally.
Season 2 is where it's at. I mean, it just keeps getting more fun.
And, yeah, we're going to get to explore some of the characters we didn't get to explore in season 1, which I think is a lot of fun. And another piece for season 2 is, before this, everyone was kind of dealing from the fallout of the defeat of the Guardians of the Globe. Now we get to see people start to stand on their own and find purposes. And that, to me, makes it really worthwhile.
Well, all right. Well, that leaves the rest of the show to discuss about my new favorite show ever, which is, of course, For All Mankind. But we have 3 seasons to go through, so I think we'll probably just barely have enough time to get through it. So, but let's go around the room real quick. We'll get everybody's just first quick initial take of seasons 1 through 3. Let's start, actually, H. Marine, did you want to talk about Invincible real quick? Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and start us off with season 1 of For All Mankind.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me. I had to go through some audio issues.
That's great.
Cool. Season 1, oh boy. Well, to start, the car porn was amazing. Seeing all those vets driving everywhere, it was so pretty. But as for the story, it started off really strong. We actually had to pause for a moment to kind of figure out, okay, what's changed for all of this to be happening. We actually had to do research for the show.
I
But
actually had fun.
no, it was enjoyable because we actually sat there and we're like, okay, who died, who lived, all right, what other events actually happened during this timeline? And so we sat there watching the first season going, okay, did JFK die? Did JFK not die? Okay, yeah, he did. And it was interesting how they kind of kept it synonymous to our own history, but with just enough slight changes for it to have enough of a difference that things were starting to happen earlier and sooner than they did in our original timeline.
Yeah, I mean, the pieces of history that had changed, it was actually kind of amusing how little things had to change in order to start this off.
I mean, what are the odds that, and this is just my minor nitpick, of course, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but what are the odds that the music would release at the same time, as it did? And of course, I'm supposed to believe that the Beatles didn't release any new music with John Lennon not being killed off, but and of course, he's consulted every so often in the news, like, all right, we need to tune into our major philosopher, John Lennon.
Our resident commie peacenik.
Yeah, exactly. It was ridiculous. But, well said. For the first season does do a lot of... there's a lot of... I think with this show, across the way that it's being done, is there's a lot of introspection to be had in the different eras. And I think it's really fascinating how they've kind of addressed the social issues a little differently, simply because the Soviet Union landed on the moon first. And I mean, that making a huge change in history, I mean, it makes sense to me. I still buy it. It's just some of the stuff, it's like, okay, so the music somehow still releases exactly the same, even though certain events don't take place, or we have a different president, which, I think it'd have a little bit more of an effect on the pop culture than that. But at the same time, that's really what hypes up. Like, season 1 does a really good job of being a good self-contained story, while simultaneously hyping up season 2 with that final, with Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That was like the cherry on top of season 1 for me. I was like, that's exactly, yep. And of course they finished the songs playing as the rocket launches out of the water. I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, and that first season does set the stage, right? I mean, we never saw a panicked trying to catch up to the Russians' NASA, right? We've always seen in our timeline NASA's, primacy in its existence. And, history has shown every time that NASA's been forced to actually do something, it does it really well.
They can get it done.
Yeah. And I think that's what separates this and really makes it worthwhile is they keep NASA permanently under the gun in this series.
China's space program is absolutely on fire right now.
Well, I mean, we're
things happening over there.
We've got Ares going to the moon in 2025, supposedly.
Yeah.
I think that's still on track. I hope it's still on track.
Yeah, but I mean,
what?
Like, how long did we spend in low Earth orbit basically twiddling our thumbs, right? Like, that's ultimately the primary issue that we have today, right?
Yeah, like I said, this show is it's a mirror. It's a fascinating introspection of our past history and up to where not quite to where we are now, but all the way through from 69 through the 90s, which is what season 3 covered. But even then, like, it's not just the era, but it's the fact that Ronald D. Moore is able to have this much social commentary while still giving us good characters. Like, this is everything that Ronald D. Moore has been working on in his writing career, was leading up to this opportunity to create something completely of his own that isn't, you know, attached to anybody's IP or anybody's canon or anybody's, you know, you need to make this kind of story. This is all
Freedom
Ronald D.
at
Moore.
last.
Like, yeah, and he's...
Yeah.
Everything's been solid. Like I said, I feel the show peaked in season 2, but that's just because I felt the narrative was a lot stronger. And, you know, as I was saying backstage, well, we'll talk about it later.
A lot of shows can have like a really great second season, and then the third could be a little slump, and you never know what happens in season 5, though. Like, you know,
That's
right?
just it. Like, I think 4 might bounce back and recover for me, because 3 for me did start a little sluggish, but 2 I was like there for it, and we had a hard time putting this show down when we had the time to watch it anyway.
Well, I think it really boils down to which is a more exciting era of space for you, moon colonization or the race to Mars, right?
Well,
because season 3 is primarily about Mars.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, we'll get into it when we get to the season 2 discussion. But season 1, I still like. This is, you know, I complained about this with Star Trek, right? With Strange New Worlds, 10 episodes is not enough for that show. That show needs like at least 15 to 20. It's just not enough.
fluff.
It's not enough for Star Trek. We've seen Star Trek have 26, 45-minute masterpieces, you know, for 7 years in a row. That's the standard to get back to. This show, however, each episode is basically a full hour. Like, there's some of them that are, you know, maybe just 50 minutes or so, but we get our full, you know, 50 minutes to an hour of content per episode. Some episodes even go more than an hour. So it all works out. So they took their 10 episodes and they give us something with each episode. I'm glad it's only 10 episodes a season, honestly, because there is so much that goes on and we move so fast through the timeline. But I mean, like, I gotta hand it to the visual effects artists, the ones that did the makeup, and like the aging on the characters is so believable and so well done. Like, they did a lot of this was not just, oh, we'll put old wrinkles on and make them look like I think they did a lot of research and genetic profiling to see like how these people should probably age for the rest of their lives, and I'm wondering how accurate they end up getting it in the end.
I'm really intrigued to like how much of this has he written in advance? Like, how far has he gone with this idea in his notebooks?
When did he start this idea?
Yeah.
I mean, I bet you he's figured out where all the major beats of each season are going to be, right? Like
how many seasons does he want to make?
Yeah. And what I'm saying, though, is like, I'm willing to bet he's figured out like every decade, these are the things that are going to happen kind of piece, right? Like, I'm willing to bet that's the case. Like, he sat down and went, okay, season 3 is going to be about the 90s, and in the 90s we're going to Mars, right? Season 2 is going to be about the 70s and 80s, and during that time era, we're going to be dealing with, you know, the moon. We're going to have a colony on it, and it's going to be the different phases of the colony, right?
Yeah. I mean, season 1 is really good at showing that just early pioneer struggle, you know, off into the final frontier, but really it's just the next frontier is the moon, and the next frontier is Mars, and then the next frontier after that's probably one of Saturn's moons, or Jupiter's moons. The thing
Jupiter
is,
Station.
Huh?
Jupiter Station.
Jupiter Station or a Titan colony, either way.
Actually, I'm gonna bet you they turn one of the, and I haven't seen any spoilers or anything to prove this, but I'm betting you they take one of the asteroids in the asteroid belt and turn it into a colony.
I could see. Yeah. So this is basically the prequel to The Expanse.
Yeah, basically.
That's pretty much what we're lining up for. Because it's not a prequel to Star Trek. Star Trek exists in this timeline, so.
Well, and I think that's actually more of what this is a prequel for, is Star Trek.
That's what it's inspired by, but no, they actually reference the show being on air and actually airing and existing in this timeline.
I think that's part of the gimmick, is to show that Ronald D. Moore, Star Trek is Star Trek wherever you go, but also like Star Trek inspired its own version of space for a lot of people, and it's not the Star Trek space. Like, what was originally created by Star Trek was the idea of good military order and discipline throughout the universe. And now in modern times, that's not reality. And I think what Ronald D. Moore is more showing the reality of it is like, yes, people back then really thought if we all just followed military code, we could be perfect, especially people that joined the military felt that way. But like, the reality of it is those guys aren't the ones that go to space. Those are the guys that fund the industrial complex. So we need more people that are explorers, more people that want to go for going's sake. And I think that's what season 1 really demonstrates, is the people at NASA weren't just bureaucrats. They were like, a lot of the science that slows them down is because they're scared they're going to kill people before they even leave atmosphere. Or they're going to send people to the moon to strand themselves and die, because scientists have done the math, and 99.99999% of the time you go to space, you die. And now we're just like, yeah, let's now be the 0.00001 chance. And then science figure it out. And then they do. But then now the next mission, because you figured that one out, let's try again. And I think it's like a really awesome explanation for what we really have lost over the years, which is the competition. Like, without an actual supreme adversary, with all of our adversaries basically just being friends that we complain about in the news and gossip about, we just kind of are all fighting each other. But like, when we had if Russia had won, we would have been like, no, we are doing this to beat Russia. And how are we going to beat them? In a competition of sport, a competition of science, not war, not aggression, but a competition of exploration. And that's the most just competition there ever was between superpowers.
Although I just got to point out that, like, man, the US gets shafted every single first in this series.
But rightfully so. When you run around being the king, you have to be the Goliath.
The thing is, but
everybody else to
but that's
enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's just it. That's really the kind of, like, slap in the face from reality. The reality check of this show is, it's like we kind of just allowed ourselves to be lazy. Like,
yeah,
we used to look up at the stars and wonder about our place. Now we stare at this stupid thing down at the dirt. That's one of my favorite lines from Interstellar. Is basically paraphrased and butchered the hell out of it just then. But it's like, we used to look up and wonder about our place in the stars, and now we just worry about our place in the dirt. And it's like, that's this show does a better job of showing that, because it shows that if the Russians won the moon, there would have been a bigger fire under our asses to keep going. And I think Ronald D. Moore might be onto something with that idea, to be perfectly honest. And John, you do know that he's also the same guy who wrote the new Battlestar Galactica, as well as wrote on DS9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to next week's show.
Because, like, when I say that it is teeing up Star Trek, what is teeing up Star Trek? In the most basic sense, he's just showing exploration. Like, in the real world, we have gotten nowhere near close to Star Trek. So
we put an RC car on Mars.
Still fighting for it. And that to me is like that's really the love note that he's writing. He's like, where did we go wrong? And
we're capable of this. We have the technology for this.
We're more than enough technology to do 10 times better. The difference is we don't have the funding or the focus.
The drive. Yeah.
And actually, guys, now that I've got you this hooked, I get to bring up one of my favorite authors, and not a fiction author at that. Guy's name is Hans Zuber. Okay. And he wrote something called Mars Direct, which basically lambasted NASA for playing it safe and sitting in low Earth orbit, instead of going to Mars because he figured it out. We could go to Mars today. If we really wanted to, we could. And if we wanted to at a level similarly shown to what's in For All Mankind, we could do it in under 5 years if we wanted to. But we're not, because the will of, the will is not there, and people are more concerned with what's going on in their own backyard,
Right.
than realizing that by doing this, by going to the stars, we solve more problems than we actually wind up creating by staying here
Yeah, I
and
agree.
throwing money at problems, right?
Well, and I think that's like a really important point, is like we can throw money at problems or we can invest in solutions.
Yep.
And I think we've spent more time enjoying just throwing money at problems because that's easier on everything. You get to say you're trying and you don't have to worry about proving it tomorrow because you're just paying for the problem.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, how
Yeah.
lazy. Like, back to Omni-Man, what's the point? If we're all just sitting here to stay sitting here looking at the dirt.
Well, and that's the other thing I realized before the show. It's like I've had people, we make way too much. There's too much content out there. There's too much stories or too much movies and TV shows and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, no, there isn't, because what are you planning to do realistically on a 2-week voyage to Mars? What are you going to be doing besides your work duties? When your work duties are done for the day? Yeah, hi Bob, exactly. That's I think that's going to have to be our new show starting greeting from now on, because I love that joke. I also love those two characters. I mean, the character development. Okay, not only do we have some fascinating introspective social commentary that is respectfully delivered for the audience to consider, we also just have some of the best characters of any show that I have seen in a long time. And I think that's part of what really sells it to me too, is like, it humanizes the astronauts in the process, which I think is also something that a lot of people need to understand, that just because these guys are brilliant physicists and scientists doesn't mean at the end of the day that they're not knocking back a few beers or some whiskey. It doesn't mean that they're sitting down. They never sit down in front of the TV. Like, I think I know I had some weird idea growing up that to be an astronaut, was impossible. Now I'm like, I could probably learn all I need to from YouTube and take a test and go from there. But
I gotta interject here. I gotta
You got a jet?
take my exit, but I want to end when you're talking about humanizing. What you just said reminded me of Chris Hadfield's book about his journey as a Canadian to become an astronaut, and it's a riveting story. It's fascinating. If you're into that sort of thing, absolutely read that book. It is great. Chris Hadfield.
Yep.
Anyways, everybody have a great night. I will keep y'all posted. Cheers. Love y'all.
Have a good
Take care.
night, Skogly. Good to see you.
So one of the things that I did want to bring up about season 1, because I've read a lot of stories about NASA and whatnot. A lot of the stories from season 1 and season 2 about the personal lives of the astronauts are based on actual stories of the stuff that happened with astronauts.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. Like growing up, I used to have the rose-tinted goggles on for. They're not really rose-tinted, but they're red. Rose-tinted goggles for the military, and used to think that America was safe because of the U.S. military. It's not. One of the flagships or one of the aircraft carriers, for example, is like held together with love and duct tape. And this was a carrier that was, actively commissioned and part of an operation in South America. Boy, that was fun. 2015 Unitas, good times. But no, as I was in the Coast Guard, I quickly became disillusioned when I found out that we're basically the poor people's military. So I was like, well, isn't that just appropriate? And then, so we get all the hand-me-downs and shit. But then I find out, on top of that, well, it's not just that we get the hand-me-downs, but the entire military, the concept of military grade just isn't all it's cracked up to be. And so I think it's important because you talk about, yeah, we could get to Mars within the next 5 years realistically, or right now we could make it happen, because part of what people need to understand is that it's actually not as impossible to understand as we've been told. Like I said, you can educate we can educate ourselves on any topic. Like, you don't have to use this thing to constantly scroll TikTok. And actually, some people on TikTok have made it educational and are using TikTok to do science videos and stuff. So it's not a complete waste of content. But like I was saying, what do you think you're going to be doing on that journey to Mars? Like, just 24/7 constantly working? Hell no. You know what I did on my ship when we were underway at the end of the workday? I'm sitting in my rack watching movies or playing video games. Like, we need all this content because it's going to be a long journey. And so it's actually a good thing that we have an abundance of art and books and shows to discuss and argue over, because when we do finally make space travel more of a reality, you're going to have plenty of time to ingest a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that piece of it too. There's, look, like, for example, the one female astronaut, the one that comes out to Deke.
Oh, yeah, the president.
Yeah, the president.
Spoilers for those who haven't seen season 3 yet.
So
I actually had Michael Okuda inadvertently spoiler that for me on Twitter, because he was raving about the character, and I was like, I need to stay away from the For All Mankind hashtag until I'm caught up.
Yeah, so that's actually based on a real female astronaut that couldn't come out while she was flying missions.
Yeah.
But her girlfriend always seemed to be there when they touched down. Right? So these are real stories. There was apparently an astronaut, and I will prevent using their name to not out them from being the hero they actually are. There was apparently a guy like Gordo.
Oh yeah.
Right? Involved for a long period of time, and these guys, these archetypes exist in the real world, and it's actually kind of interesting that they grabbed as many real life stories about these people as they did, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's going into season 2. Season 2 I felt was the strongest season so far. It's not because I hated season 3. It's just it felt that narratively the story was there. I was just so, we'll get to season 3 in a second, but moving more focused into season 2. So yes, I did like how the 80s were properly set up, with that really good song from Tears for Fears going into it. I was like, I'm hyped for this. Let's go. Who's gonna rule the world? The Russians or the US? And the struggle with the establishing the moon base was, I mean, at first you're thinking, oh man, they gunned down those 2 Russians and killed one of them in cold blood, or hot blood, I guess, because they, lit his O2 on fire. And then you find out that the Russians already brought up their own Space K-47s. And so they were getting ready for an invasion.
Okay, I just love that, Space K-47.
Exactly. I'm going to put that in the chat.
That's a hashtag right there. Space K-47. Oh man.
But yes, the Space K-47, they had their whole, they were ready for an invasion and basically waited until they got their excuse. And so as it turns out, nobody's acting in good faith. They're all shaking hands while holding their guns behind each other's backs. And then of course it was, I mean,
that's the sign of the great writing. Like, if I'm being honest, like, that's where you really feel the tension is they do so well to write one side and then prove to you that the other sides are just as nefarious while simultaneously thinking about the same cost. Like, they are like, we don't want to piss off the Americans too much, but we know for a fact they're going to be bringing guns. And
Yeah,
it's
well, I mean,
they just did such a good job of that.
well, I mean, the Cold Warriors that were around at that period of time knew each other quite well and knew exactly how the other one would respond, right?
Yeah.
For the Russians to just jump a claim, for lack of a better term, on the moon was not unexpected at all,
No.
right? And the Americans had to know that was coming, and they had to be getting ready for it. And all of this kind of fits together, like it's what you would expect, right? And yeah, look, was it a misunderstanding? Sure. But wasn't everybody waiting for that misunderstanding to happen because they knew it was going to eventually?
And that's exactly how the Russians would do it too. They would stockpile their Space K-47s up at their colony and then just wait until something happens. Like basically putting their cosmonauts on the line to get shot first so that they can respond and be just. And it's like, that is so Russian of you.
Well, it is,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like that's...
Well, cosmonaut Midas will be red shirt. I mean,
he's
the
all red.
Americans-
they're all red. Yeah, exactly. The
Americans-
Soviet Union's all red shirts. Everybody's
the Americans are the
equally
most-
expendable.
The Americans are the most American. They're like, yeah, we're just bringing this for self-defense.
Hey, at least they were honest about it, and that's why it's like at first
Well,
you think,
no, dude,
the Americans
literally...
They think the Americans are aggressive, and then, like I said, oh no, as it turns out, the cosmonauts are also, space marines too, but for the Russian side. And
Space Naz.
They had way more space Ks than they had, space M4s. I gotta think of another one. What do we got?
Well, it's the Spetsnaz or the Russian special forces. So there's Spetsnaz.
Space Nazi. No, wait.
No, that's a different movie.
That's a different type of tyranny.
No, that's Iron Sky, which, if you haven't seen that movie, is so funny.
Really? Okay.
Oh God, it's hilariously B movie.
Is it like Police Cops funny or no? Wait, that's the Simpsons joke. What's the one with the Triceracop, and then he fights commie Nazis?
Yeah.
It's basically like Kung Fu Hustle, but it's something else. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I love
that
movie
kind of
too.
idea.
It's ridiculous, over the top fun, but that's one we could definitely. Ooh, I might have to pick that one for my birthday if I can even remember what the movie's called. I can never remember the title of the movie.
Yeah, it's.
But anyway.
Like, yeah, the idea though is that, look, they were ready for it. They expected it. Both sides expected something to happen because it was going to. And if it wasn't for a whole lot of people trying to push a peace agenda. And putting together a symbol that made everybody go, okay, yeah, we're all being dicks here, right? If it hadn't been for that, that would have spilled over into a much larger conflict.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
No, this show does a very good job. Ronald D. Moore does a very good job, similarly to how he did with DS9 in showing both sides of the argument that there is both wisdom in the explorer, but there's also wisdom in the soldier as well. And so that's why Starfleet as a concept works, because it's the proper marriage of science and military working together, taking the best of those structures, and that's what they're trying to show here in Nest. That's why they have, there is a necessity of chain of command. That's what we learn in season 3 with the idiocy of Helios, that you need to have a certain amount of rank and structure, and there has to be a certain amount of compliance, and you can't tolerate too much insubordination. But but you don't want that to be a power structure to control people with. That's the balance, is people have to want to follow the structure, and that's the only way it works in space. And that's what we see at the end of season 1 when Ed is like, no, I'll just stay here a couple of weeks, and she goes, nope, you are relieved, and then orders him off the base, and that's the end of season 1. And then of course
it needed to happen because
yeah. So that's why this show has kind of transitioned from science fiction. Now we've moved a little bit more to science fantasy, because I do think that a creative liberty was taken a bit with how advanced the technology got in the 90s. It was rather annoying how everybody has a 16:9 flat screen, and yet they're still watching 4x3 broadcasts. And yet they have the flat screen displays and the Helios ship and everything, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know that you guys said the computer age started a little earlier in this timeline, but you're still feel like we're jumping the gun here. And that's why, again, you're telling me that auto-tune and dubstep hasn't been invented in the 90s yet as a result? Like,
well, okay, so part of it I do get, right? Because the biggest, I would argue, change when they hit the 90s is that nuclear fusion is readily available, and from the sounds of it, fairly cheap. That when like electrical power becomes that cheap, a lot of doors open, right? You can take shortcuts that we would never dream of taking now. Right? So some of that stuff does make sense, right? The reason why flat screens took so long to come about was the relative availability of helium, which is actually what's used to cool flat screens. If we didn't really care because we're using helium-3 as a fuel source and we have like buckets of the stuff lying around, yeah, I could see flat screens around, no problem, right?
Yes, but it was also the fact that they were still broadcasting in 4x3, and yet it's like, okay, we get it. You're trying to say this isn't the 90s that we know anymore at this point, and so I think there should have been a little bit more effort made, because it's like, oh yeah, it's still the 90s because the video quality is still the 90s, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Well, it kind of does, right? Because if recording technology didn't keep up with the display technology, which is possible, right?
Which like, they kind of implied with the video call quality not being super great, which I like that they were trying. It just, I don't know, it felt like they were trying in some areas, and then they got to a point where just like, it'll look like this because it does, and it's like, I guess, I don't know. I just feel like the 90s just started to feel a little bit too much like current era is what.
I guess I get that, right? I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm still, in current era in the 90s. So, I guess that kind of tracks. Right? But
yeah. But let's real quick, H. Marie, what were your thoughts with regard to season 2?
Season 2 was the 80s-ish time, correct?
Affirmative.
Yeah.
So I actually found it interesting how they managed to get Tracy on television, because I mean, hot blonde, husband of the, one of the first men in space, and wife to, yeah. Anyway, now my train of thought derailed. Hold on, I got train. There we go. So them putting her on TV and then end up having her go into space while they're filming her was actually an interesting point of view, because MTV was just starting to become a thing. Reality TV shows were slowly starting to become a thing, and people were kind of interested to see the behind the scenes of life of, this woman who became a model but is also an astronaut. What's it like up in space for her specifically? I am glad that they ended up kind of cutting off the filming at one point, because it was kind of starting to get to the point of interrupting the actual show for me. I felt like I was watching more of like a fake 80s reality show versus For All Mankind. But they did end the season in a rather interesting way. I'm sad. I actually cried at the end of season 2. I don't cry a whole lot of shows or movies, and the fact that it made me shed a good couple of tears is a sign of good writing to me.
Well, and for a show like For All Mankind, it's a sign of good writing. It's also a sign of great execution by the actors. Like I said, this is some of the best screen performance that I've seen anyone do, because the range of these characters, like the character who or the actress who plays Karen, for example, she's only 38. And in the season 3, she has me convinced that she's much older than she actually is. I mean, they all do. But it was just that takes so much to understand and bring to life. And it's just, yes, the makeup also has to be convincing as well. And then that's also why it works. Everything about this show, it takes a lot of risks and creative leaps, but they have all paid off so far. I mean, I cannot rave about this show enough. This is currently this is the best thing I've seen since Silo. Easily, hands down. And so, yeah, season 2, that ending is like, I both love and hate it, because, yeah, it goes there, it kills off who I think were 2 of the powerhouse characters of the show.
Yeah, but they kind of needed to go at this point in the series, right?
I guess. I honestly thought they were on their rebound and recovery and gonna, actually get their redemption. And, well, I guess they did, but at the expense of their lives. The craziness. I'm still trying to go over that. Like, why you would run outside? Just
because if not the
base would have blown up and whatnot. And even then, I was like, okay, the circumstances that set that up even seem more convenient than they should be, and And then I think that's probably my biggest problem going into season 3 is the motivations for blowing up the Johnson Space Center were finicky and not even there at best. It was just, it's like, okay, a bunch of conspiracy nutters get a motivation to destroy NASA because they're just crazy and stupid. That's
not exactly right. Okay, so part of this is, you got to remember that this is taking this is replacing the Oklahoma City bombing, right?
Yeah.
Like in the timeline, like this is their Timothy McVeigh kind of thing, right? And the reason why they're doing this, from the understanding that they've got, is that they think that NASA's lying to them. Right? Which, in some respects, they are. Right?
Yeah, yes, but the thing to do for that is to do the Snowden maneuver, is to infiltrate, find information, find the truth, and expose it. That's like...
Well, that's what rational people would do.
Yes, but again, there's... The psychology of this does not match with anything. The reason why McVeigh blew up the Murrah building was a revenge for what happened at Waco. And
exactly.
Waco killed, 78 people, including 25 children burned to death at the hands of the government. So it's like that motivation is more understood, even though there's problems with that whole event that we can talk about on a Friday show, or on the Rogue Council, actually.
Yeah, that's more Rogue Council
one for the Rogue
direction.
Council to go over the Edward P. Murrah. So it's just the whole point and motivation of it. It was like, I feel like this was the weakest point of storytelling so far, and that the motivations weren't entirely made clear, and there's more logistics involved to actually get an explosive device that would cause that kind of damage. One of the biggest issues, with the Murrah people, with the Murrah building bombing, is the fact that you cannot get that result with a fertilizer bomb. That has been proven false already many times over in all kinds of different experiments, and yet it's still being pushed as, oh yeah, no, this is what totally took it down.
Well, I mean, in this case, it would be safe to say that, this is the Johnson Space Center. Where they're bringing in all the helium-3 they're mining, and, probably making a lot of jet fuel. Right?
So they could have probably caused a chain reaction and something, and it would have been. It's just, like I said, the whole point is that the motivation here isn't really made clear, and then we kind of just brush it off in season 4 like it's whatever, and I'm like, that's not... You should have... With all the world building and in-depth character development that he went through, he just kind of takes... what was his name? Danny's the older one. He's the... Jimmy. He just kind of takes Jimmy and puts him in this crowd of misfits, and then it's like the misfits turn out to be terrorists, and it's like, this makes zero sense. But alright, it is what it is. That was probably my biggest gripe with season 3. And then, of course, killing off Karen was, I guess, inevitable, but it just seems to get to that point in the story. It felt like it felt like we were just kind of doing drama to cap off the season to make it a big deal. Like, this was the one part where I felt that we were just trying to get something big to happen to make other things happen, and I just didn't agree with how we got there in the execution overall, but that's just my opinion on it. Otherwise, like I said, season 1, season 2, still fantastic. Season 3, a lot of great story stuff happens all the way through. I did like how the American and the cosmonaut trip over each other to get to the to the
Well, I
finish
mean,
line.
that whole race was excellent, like, and just
Yeah,
portrayed properly, right? Where, you know, you've got like the corporation that's got this all figured out and has built the biggest, baddest, fastest engine they possibly could figure out to build.
exactly.
Strapped it on a hotel and just went for it. All right, and you've got NASA going like, oh yeah, I guess you're gonna beat us. Deploy the solar sail, right? And you know, smoking everyone, and the Russians going, no, we are not coming in last, and trying to overload their own damn engine to make it. And I'm like, that is the most Russian thing to do when they're in third.
So I actually had a realization early on in the show that I was very happy to find out, because we were trying to figure out what is the point of this the immigrant girl's story, Alita. Like, we were trying to figure out like what's the point, and I was like, well, she's obsessed with fire. Her dad's a janitor at NASA. I'm like, I bet she's gonna build the engines to Mars,
Yeah.
and that is exactly what happened. But I just guessed that first season. But her story's been very interesting to watch.
Yeah, what do you want to bet she's going to be taking Margot's role coming
I
forward?
think she's and Margot, that character.
Yeah. That character is fascinating. I do find it very interesting that in order to create the timeline they did, they felt it was necessary to actually get rid of Werner von Braun, like to get him out of the equation to make it work.
I did like how his whole storyline went down. First of all, the fact that they did address his allegiances in the war, and then decided to basically, you know, put that out. I felt that his character, you know, was treated fairly overall. I did also like the twist that Margot's dad turned out to have been worked on the Manhattan Project, and of course that obviously caused her to see that you know, certain circumstances can arise where, you know, everybody made some kind of compromise. You know, there weren't really, at the end of the day, there were really no saints in World War II. I mean, it's like I say with every war, the only heroes are the soldiers who fought on the battlefield because they thought they were fighting for their homes and fighting for, you know, their freedom. And everybody thinks they're the good guys in war. But at the end of the day, war since World War I has just been the arguments of rich people settled with the blood of the poor people. And yeah, For All Mankind doesn't really touch on that, doesn't really go on off of that. It's definitely a show that is built off of the America that I thought we grew up in. Of course, at the same time, I also don't really like the idea of the Soviets lasting past 1991. That seems like,
Well, I mean,
for everything else going right in that timeline, I'm like, I see that and I'm like, no, I'm staying in this one.
well, I mean, like, I agree with you there, right? The idea that Soviet Russia would last this long is kind of laughable, but
It really kind of, like, that's another kind of weak point in this series that they don't really,
But-
like, I guess you
well,
could say
okay,
that,
hold on. Here's the argument. By being propped up by the resources they were getting from the moon, it's possible that they avoided some of the major issues,
okay, yeah.
right? Like,
Not just possible, but when we said it earlier, like when NASA was told to do something, they figured it out. But I think this goes to show the CIA was told to do something, and that's what we told us, like, focus. And like, yeah, we beat Russia, but at what cost? Like, sure, we beat the Soviet Union. Because I think like this show really goes to show like the truth behind the curtain, that like freedom wins because freedom is innovation. when you aren't constantly weighed down by impressing the current system, whether it's right, left, communist, or free, like when you're just free to go, nah, not my problem, not my fight, I'm out. That's a whole different world than when you're in a life where they're constantly like, if you don't support us, you're against us, and if you're against us, you are my enemy. Like, communism is very Anakin Skywalker. Freedom is very Obi-Wan, in the sense that, like, you have to choose not to be a bad guy. You have to choose to do the right thing. And I think that's really what the show is showing, is that, like, we're not just the result of evil propagating evil. We're the result of not holding our leaders to account. We're not telling them to focus on what actually matters. Instead, we're letting them telling us what matters. As if any of them are anything but us. Like, most of them would probably rather be at home watching For All Mankind than pretending like they are solving the world's problems. Because, like, A, arrogant, and B, it's one nation. It shouldn't be one nation's problems to solve all the world's problems. We really need to, like, find our scope and then hone it and focus on that, and let Russia focus on Russia, and let China focus on China. And when they overstep, the best you can do is say, hey, cut it out. But, like, we're not anybody's dad.
No.
We're just a child like all these other nations that are relatively new. None of the leaders are Omni-Man. None of them have lived multiple lives and remember everything from every life.
It really is fascinating, the correlation between For All Mankind and Invincible, in that they're both just very heavy-handed shows, and yet they're also very, just very honest with their commentary and straightforward. And it's I'm really glad that we're watching both of these, and I'm looking forward to finishing both of these seasons out as we go forward. And of course, bringing back DS9 into the loop, especially so we can compare some of Moore's classic writing or earlier writing to this show specifically. So it's cool that that's working out.
Yeah, and I mean, you can definitely see some of the refinement here, and I do think that personally this was going to make for an interesting prequel to The Expanse, at least in my head canon.
Right.
But you know, I think the reason why the show captures so much of the imagination has everything to do with this is the road we all thought we were on, right? We all thought we were, anytime this year they're going to start launching a base on the moon.
Yeah.
Right? Anytime this year the Mars race was going to begin, right? We all figured Elon was going to, strap a couple of high-powered rockets to the International Space Station and yeet it at Mars, right? Like, we all kind of felt that way, and it never really came about.
No.
And I think that's why this show captures so much of the imagination.
Like I said, it's an introspective mirror into what we could be doing, where we could be at right now, and yet it does so respectfully, but also keeps you entertained. It also, has you continually care about these characters. It's just, I can't praise this show enough. Like I said, as much as I enjoyed Silo, this show is absolutely up there. It is worth watching. It is definitely binge-worthy content. Even though I wish I had more room to breathe with this one every few episodes, it was my turn to play catch up on something, and so I did my best. And of course, next week we will be completely caught up on both shows and be able to do the discussion with fans that are on top of the episodes. So we do appreciate everybody's patience with us playing catch up and still being able to rave about the stuff we like until then. Yeah, let's see what else with season 3. There's so much that happened with season 3 as well. I mean, it was like I said, it kind of starts to get to that, overbearing drama situation, because how much is Ed gonna suffer and lose before, like, it's getting to the point where when Ed dies, I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna be like, yay,
He's free finally.
Free from all the horribleness of exist. Like, though, he faces just some of the worst of the worst. Like, I mean,
Okay, no. Now we've got to ask the really important question of who had it worse. Okay? Ed or that North Korean astronaut?
Yeah, the guy who actually won Mars.
That is the best part.
It's just...
That is the best part. When the Russian and Poole are sitting there and they turn to each other and they're like, oh, God damn it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, how the hell did this happen?
How do they get there? They realize, wait, you've been here since February 8th? Oh, wow. First man on Mars is actually the North Koreans. Okay, that was unexpected.
But you know what? Like, that's part of the fun of this, right? Because you could almost see something that ridiculous happening at some point, right? Like, there's some sort of like screwball accident and this occurs, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, and then of course they end up banishing Danny there, which I guess he decides to swallow lead or something, or well, I don't know. John, do we find out what happens to Danny?
No, we kind of assumed that he swallowed lead.
Yeah. We assume he dug up the pistol.
Yeah.
And at the same time, well, so far we haven't figured out what happens to him in season 4. And I think that that's kind of the fun of this show, is that, like, a lot of these Easter eggs aren't really Easter eggs if you're paying attention. Like, the North Koreans were 100% the first to shoot for Mars, and we early on heard that. We just thought it was a complete failure because they said it was. Because it was. He didn't have a radio.
Right, yeah, his communications got knocked out.
And that to me is like a really fun part of this show, is that there are so many pieces that are written and you consider them a one-off because you're not listening or because it wasn't important, and then it is, and you're like, wait a minute, they did say that earlier. Like, there's no MacGuffin, there's no big bad guy of the week. Like, every episode is a continuation of everything so far.
Yeah.
And I love that. And to me, I think that's like, it goes to show what good writing is supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to write the whole line regardless of what other people feel. Because, like, yeah, season 3 might have been slow in terms of, like, cool, where season 2 had a lot of heroics, but season 3 had a ton of politics. Like, it was the most Game of Thrones episode. And if we know anything about reality, it's that politics infect and obliterate everything.
Just about.
Yeah. And stagnate everything. And so I think that, like, one of the coolest things about Molly getting sent to Russia at the end of season 3.
You mean
Margot.
Sorry, Margot.
Molly got sent to heaven at the end of season 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I don't really know how. They just don't explain it. She goes back and then dies because of reasons. I was like, what?
Well, no, she was in the blast zone.
Well, yeah, but she went back in, and then I guess
she was rescuing people.
Yeah.
And the thing fell.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I
missed that. And then that's where Margot died. And I love that they just skip ahead. They're like, no, Margot didn't die. Because, like, you can't have Margot die, because as far as, like, MacGuffins go, and this is the way I think it should be, is characters should be your MacGuffins.
That's also been my other issue, was season 1 did a way better job of hyping up season 2, whereas season 2 did a better job of hyping up season 3, whereas season 3, what song was it going into 2003 with? It was I think it was Black Hole Sun, but it was it was just so...
It was perfect, because I think that's what I'm saying is Margot is the ultimate MacGuffin in terms of she's a nerd for nerd's sake.
Yeah.
And the reason that she saved the Russians is because the Russians saved her. And the reason that this space fight is even going on is because of her, because her dad helped build the bomb that killed thousands of Japanese people instantaneously, and then thousands more over years of radiation. And her uncle, in her eyes, is Werner von Braun, a Nazi scientist. So like her entire mission is to be a nerd before a nation, right? And she believes wholeheartedly that if everybody just focuses on science, they at least won't go to war with each other.
Well,
And
I love that one of the smartest
weapons goes, she can do so much in Russia. And even in, as far as I am in season 4, we're just seeing who Margot is even more to herself.
Well, what I thought was she's one of the smartest ladies in the room, and she was possibly Russia's most useful idiot, right?
And
like she did not clue in.
She wasn't ruining any, like her actions didn't lead to Russia's nuclear arsenal. Her actions just led to a continued competition, which she wholeheartedly believed in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think she's Russia's useful idiot. I think Russia's her useful idiot. Because, to me, Margot's the one that sees the writing on the wall. If they're at war, industrial complex wins. If we shift it to the space industrial complex, bummer, dude. Everybody needs to go to space, and there's infinite space to explore. So there's infinite potential for lives to be lived without war. And I think that's really the like, I don't know, the way the characters are written is each of them has their own motivation that is intrinsic. And whereas like Ed's intrinsic motivation is to be the explorer he always heard about, while also being the hero that he always heard about, while also being Captain America, and knowing full well that like the world's changing, so he's just trying to like ride that wave. Whereas Margot has just always been like, there are two options. We can do science for exploration, or we can do science for war. And I'm betting the house on exploration. And she's not only betting the house, but running the house. And then she gets run out because the politicians and the war profiteers are like, yo, this is not fair. And she's like, nobody died. Like, that's her big beef. She's like, I didn't lead to any deaths, and you guys are mad at me about treason.
Right. Her entire motivation was humanitarian. She had no interest in trying to give the Russians an edge, but she also had no interest in allowing them to die when she had the knowledge to prevent it. And that was you know, her entire motivation was placing the safety of life first. And that's just it. We aren't going to survive in the stars if we don't prioritize safety of life at sea. Otherwise, there's no point. There's no point to any of it if we're not going to save. Like, yeah, I get it. People are going to die. It's risky. There's certain stuff that's unavoidable. But
otherwise we 100% repeat colonial Europe.
Well, that's the thing.
If we do not go in with the conscience that life matters regardless of what life we meet, we will 100% repeat the atrocities of colonial Europe.
Okay, but I am going to counter that discussion. I do think that if we run into alien life, and I know this is going to sound like blasphemy on this channel, but I do think that if we run into alien life, we seriously need to consider wiping it out as quickly as possible.
No, that's not fair. Because that's what, if we're doing that, they're doing that.
Well, but that's why.
So that's the thing that like America did better than any other nation to date. And this is like, to me, the pinnacle. It's no, if you come for us, we will obliterate every single thing you send our way. But if you don't come for us, eventually we'll trade. But every single time you send something at us, we will send tenfold back. And that's the, equal and overpowering response. But to me, that's the way you deal with any and all hostile threats, is you don't act first, kill later. You instead say, if you come at me, oops.
See, here's why I disagree with you. Okay. If we are at the point where we can run into like intelligent alien life, which means it's probably beyond our solar system, and if we're running into it and we're not the ones that initially meet them, right? Like if they're traveling to us to say hello, then their engines alone will have the sufficient energy to accelerate a meteor to fast enough to crack the Earth like an egg.
Right, but we're not the Earth. We're humans. We're people, and that's what I mean. That's the only way we maintain our sovereignty and our moral superiority. If we act like monsters, we deserve to die like monsters.
All I'm making the argument is, if we are running into an alien species, I mean, look, every time humanity has run into a less civilized, quote unquote, version of humanity, it has not gone well for the less advanced one.
Exactly. And that to me is the issue.
No.
I disagree. If that was absolute fact, Corion, there wouldn't be uncontacted tribes that we've left be in peace because, well, they're not doing anything to pose a threat. We've chosen to respect their right to exist, even though they're technologically inferior. So if we can, while we have been terrible to primitive cultures in the past, we've also recognized the necessity of letting them be and live in peace. And it's possible that we already have the same considerations from other more advanced civilizations that have basically, left us to figure ourselves out until we can stop blowing each other up with nukes.
Right. Well, that makes the zoo theory, right? And I don't like the idea of being kept like a pet any better.
Right, but we're not being kept like pets. Instead, we're being respected for our ignorance.
We're being restricted until we can figure out how to behave like an adult.
We're not being restricted. Like, as far as we
can't detonate nukes in space, John.
Yeah, okay. That's not restricted from ourselves. That's our nukes are restricted. Our weapons are restricted. That's like literally stopping a toddler from sticking a fork in the oven.
That's basically what I've basically concluded to, yeah.
Right, but that's not necessarily saying, like, they're not even parenting. They didn't say stop. They just said don't. And then we did, and then it didn't happen. And we don't know why, and we don't know how, or
yeah, but at the same time, sometimes it's better to learn that fire is hot by getting burned.
Right. But what if that fire is so hot you kill all of your people all to see if fire is hot? And that's not parenting. Again, it's just like, no, we're going to protect all of them because you're so stupid you thought this was okay. And we don't know. It was one of the major theories when it comes to nuclear power and nuclear detonation.
Well, it's not a theory. It literally, we literally tried to detonate a nuke in space, and something came down and was observed neutralizing the warhead.
Right, but it didn't come back and then announce itself like Zod, saying, I'm your king and you're not alone. Instead, it just stopped that one muscle, that one swing of our human existence, and was like, nope, too far. And that's it.
Right.
It literally said, nope, too far, and walked away. So automatically it's better than us, because if our kids do that, what do? We yell at them. If North Korea tests a nuclear bomb, what do? We sanction them. We hold them back. These aliens didn't do anything except turn the bomb off and walk away. And that's more respectful of individual sovereignty than anything, because they're not here to be our dad. They're not here to be our shepherd. They're not here to be our mentor, but they're also not here to be killed by our nukes. And it's like, what if the whole reason they turned that missile off is because it was only going to blow up their shelter? Fine. Like, you're literally only defending yourself from explosion and you're not retaliating? Way to be the bigger man. way
Yeah,
to
but
be
that's
bigger
almost
and better.
more terrifying, though, right?
It is.
Like,
It is. Somebody is so powerful that they could wipe us out in an instant, and instead they just turn off our bombs.
right. So
What kind
that
of
means we've
person
basically
lives
already
that way?
lost, right? Like,
Exactly. But should we not have?
no, but we're never going to catch up then, right? The game's already over.
But
We
that's
don't know. We don't know.
We
We
don't,
don't know the motivations behind neutralizing our warheads. All we know is that happened, and whatever entity or force did that didn't feel like revealing themselves, and so they could later.
also
We could be
didn't
kept in
feel
a
like it
cage.
needed to teach us a lesson.
No blowing up nukes in space. I
But it
mean,
didn't
that
teach
doesn't
that
sound
lesson. It
unreasonable to me.
It didn't teach that lesson. The lesson it truly taught the government was, well, that was a $1 billion waste of money. And that's it. Because you bet your ass they still want to nuke space. They just don't know why that one got turned off.
No, we physically cannot nuke space. Ever since that incident, we have never tried since to send a nuke into orbit and blow it up. And I don't think we have nuclear anything in orbit right now, or is the space station's on solar?
Well, yes, it's solar.
Does it have a
but
nuclear core?
There are satellites that do have nuclear
Okay.
power.
So they do distinguish, but so they know the difference between our warheads and our engines.
Yeah, well, power plants anyway, and they have tested nuclear engines in space.
Yeah.
And let's be clear. The difference between a nuclear bomb and a nuclear engine
Is substantial.
is
substantial.
Is insubstantial.
I was gonna say, like the whole reason we don't have nuclear cars is because we'd all be.
Every engine is a weapon.
Yeah,
dude.
exactly.
Read about something called the Kaczynski lesson.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
It's there's all kinds of that.
It is and it isn't inconsequential. Like it just depends on what the reaction will do. Like that's kind of the problem of not seeing.
Well,
what
I think it is harder.
Space.
I think there's fail safes on the power plants that are designed to prevent it being so easily weaponized, as well as.
Not only weaponized, it's a different uranium. There's 237 for actual explosions and 235 for dirty bombs, but then there's the uranium that they use in power plants, which I think is 230 or 231.
Oh, good. I love that we're ending the broadcast on a nuclear physics educational discussion. This like I said, you're gonna get. Yeah, this is what we mean by honest quality human content. We aren't afraid to bust out the textbooks on air.
Well, it's the biggest thing. Like that was the whole 3 Mile Island issue, was that everybody thought the reactor was going to Chernobyl, but they had spent so much time finding a nuclear power source that wasn't ever going to become Chernobyl, and then simultaneously found a bunch of other redundancies to ensure safety, that now at this point we're using a different nuclear resource. And that's the thing that comes full circle to space. Theoretically, we could develop a nuclear engine that, if exposed, shuts itself down, just cannot function. And that's where we then change the game, where it does become consequential. Like there are nuclear bombs and there's nuclear engines, and nuclear engines have no relationship with nuclear bombs, especially because nuclear bombs are almost always going to rely on fission, whereas nuclear engines are going to transition to fusion. And then we have a non-explosive resource, just a contained explosion that's perpetual, or at least semi-perpetual, like the sun. And that's the big goal. But at the same time,
all engines
without real transparent competition, we have nothing. Like the only people America's innovation is only competing with American innovation. Name one Russian equal. Name one Chinese equal. Well, and China's been stealing blueprints for decades and centuries, and their phones are still equal. They only come up reactionary, whereas like when it comes to America, like we need another free spirit to compete with. We need another country that is somehow equal to us in all things innovation, population,
Yeah,
and
so actually,
national
it
size.
is a lot harder. You're right, because for nuclear reactors, they primarily use uranium-238, which is slower. It's slow because
Yeah.
you want the slower reaction, whereas 235 it's 235 and plutonium-239 that are primarily used
Those
for
are the two
weapons.
that you use
So,
for weapons.
so it is actually, there is quite a bit of a difference, and it's not as easy for 235 to be weaponized because it's also not meant to function that way. Just from what I'm skimming on this article here from PBS, so take
Right,
that as you
but
will.
what I'm saying is, guys, never underestimate the power of an engine to be used as a weapon.
Oh, definitely not. Like, we definitely need to, as humans and we all do need to collectively agree and well, come to our own realizations, but at least come to the conclusion that we need to respect these weapons, and that's, you know, that's what I loved about Oppenheimer, was the fact that it not only, you know, humanizes the father of the bomb in such an impactful way, but it also shows us that the truth of the matter is nuclear weapons aren't some special thing that you know, only certain people would use. We all have the capability of pushing the red button. We all have the capability of such destructive power. That's the thing, is it's not like, oh, who has we just get rid of the nuclear weapons and that's gone. That doesn't work. That's the same reason why we can't get rid of all the guns. The knowledge is there. You can't get rid of the knowledge. How many factions have risen and fallen trying to use censorship, trying to use book burning, trying to contain knowledge, and have failed? Spoiler alert, all of them.
I would go so far as to say that it's not about the knowledge, it's about the reason. Everybody seems to have a reason as to why nukes are acceptable. And if the fact that you're a person thinking that that is justifiable, that's the issue. Like, even me personally, somebody who abhors the idea of death, I can still see the importance of having a weapon capable of such death. And therefore, it's manners maketh man. Like, the only thing that separates us from our apes and our lions and our tigers is the fact that we keep separating ourselves. It's the fact that we continue to be better than the monsters. But as soon as we act monstrous, we deserve a monstrous death. And that's the fatal flaw of letting tyrants exist. Because they can do so much monstrosity. They can create so much terror. And if we think for 1 second any one of us is capable of wrangling that beast, the arrogance. Like, our only choice is to admit that we are all monsters and we are all hiding that monster.
We are all capable. We are all capable of being monsters, but we are not defined as monsters except by our own individual choices. So
we are all monsters fighting the urge to be monsters. And those that fight it the best, awesome. Those that fight it the worst, awesome. We need both. We need left and right lateral limits. We need to know that, like, the only thing that separates man from animal is the fact that man keeps trying to distinguish itself from animal. And that means every single animal we meet, because we're animals too. We're all wolves. We're all dogs. We're all capable of becoming a problem. And if we don't accept that, we're the problem.
Right. No, you see, John, I found the correct religion at one point, and so I know what I'm saved and taken care of. You guys are the problem. I already found purification. It's your fault.
Be saved, but freaking act like it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, anybody who's been saved by anything doesn't act like a pompous.
You don't have to say it. If you know you're right, you don't need to constantly say it. That's the fun part that I'm realizing. The more and more life goes on, I'm like, I already know how things are, so.
God, it must burn your biscuit that I've just been sitting here quiet the whole time then.
With regard to
But
what?
no, about the whole you don't have to talk about it to be saved, and I'm sitting here nice and quiet and smiling. But anyway, no, look, to me, I'm gonna disagree on your premise that we all make the decision not to choose violence today. Look, it's not that I'm not choosing to commit violence. It's that I'm far more creative than that. If I need to get my way done, it seems to me violence just seems like the easy answer, and I'd much prefer to come up with a better one.
It comes down to the fact that, if you build your empire on lies, you're never going to have time to enjoy it, because you're going to be constantly plugging your leaks until you can't plug them and you collapse, or you pass on your empire of lies to your children and they find out, oh, this was an empire of lies, and it collapses on them anyway. Lies do not last. Truth is eternal. But here's the kicker.
I thought you said empire of lives. And I like that even better. When you're constantly killing people, you're justifying your death warrant. And that to me is the biggest beef. It's like, you can be capable of killing people, and then choosing not to makes you a better person. Like, learning how, learning more, being creative, awesome. Do it. Go for gold. But when you find the way to get revenge on your enemy, and then you choose not to, now that's a man. That's an adult. Is it the right option? I don't know. But is it the difference between a monster and a person? Yes. Choosing to be bigger than the thing that hurt you is always the better thing to do.
Yeah,
now,
but
you get revenge indirectly because you succeeded and they continued to fail and you didn't help them. Also fine.
Yeah, well, that's more my philosophy is like, yo, man, I would just rather deal with my shit, right?
See, so I'll give a
My
real
philosophy is reap what you sow, so you know what you grow.
Yeah, I'll give a quick real life example of how I do. Now, this might come as a shock to you, but I deliver pizza for a living. I know. Woo, I'm not living off of YouTube right now. Shocker. The thing about it is there's a lot of ways. First of all, perspective is what matters at any job you work in. I happen to love what I do. I just wish that we made a little bit more money, or that things weren't so expensive right now, because it still feels like I'm spinning in the dirt. But that's because our economy sucks, and that's another conversation. But the thing about it is, sometimes some people don't tip. And, like, on the one hand, we aren't supposed to be functioning on a tip economy. Tipping was originally created as a concept, as a way for people to have the option to go above and beyond, but by no means are you supposed to be living off of going above and beyond. It defeats where we're at now with what was intended is departed from it. So it really sucks when some customers decide that they're better than everybody else, and they don't need to tip for anything. But you know what I do about it? While I might be angry in the moment and not upset, as soon as I deliver my product, if I talk to them, I wish them a good day, and I go back to my life, and I move on. And I basically say, your karma's problem now. At the same time, I don't like to assume the worst, because, as I said, it's a shit economy. I'm honestly grateful that anybody can spare anything. Now, sometimes it's like, okay, $2 and you clearly have a 20-bedroom house. Like, that's ridiculous, man. But I don't say it to them. I don't need to. It's their choice. They're making their decision. They're affording what they feel they can for my service, and I'm still going to give my best service regardless, because they aren't the only customer that I care about at the end of the night, and, I'm not going to be brought down by somebody else's inability to recognize, what you're supposed to do. Anyway.
No, look, I look at it this way.
You got like 30 seconds.
Yeah. I have I don't hold a grudge, because I have no surviving enemies.
Exactly.
And that's just how it is.
Yeah, so that's why you want to. We'll continue this discussion probably. We got a discussion coming up on Friday. Star Wars Mandalorian season 1 and 2 with Nemesis of Eden. as well as any topics that you, the audience, want to bring on Casual Free for All Friday. It is an open forum discussion. It is your place on this channel to have your voice heard regardless. We do try to keep it pop culture, but of course, with the shows, that can make it hard. So I want to say again, thank you to the lovely Sherry for popping in, Stephanie Danizek, everybody else. I'm PD over the Writer Brothers. I'll see you next week. This has been a presentation of the Writer Brothers Tuesday Night Live Show. The Writer Brothers, honest, quality human content.